At dawn on March 16, 1944, Private Masaru Takeda stood silently beneath a cold, gray sky on a small island in the Pacific. The salty wind cut through the thick jungle, carrying the distant roar of artillery and the faint crackle of gunfire. It was early morning, but the island felt eerily still except for the rustling leaves and the steady drip of rain from the dense canopy above. Masaru was 21 years old, fresh-faced, but already worn by months of relentless fighting. His uniform was stained with mud and sweat, and his hands trembled slightly from fatigue. Around him, the men of the 3rd Battalion whispered hurried prayers or checked their rifles one last time. They had been told the next few hours would decide their fate. From the ridge, Masaru could see the faint outlines of enemy soldiers approaching through the mist. He gripped his rifle tighter, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. The battalion's commander had promised they would hold their ground no matter the cost. But Masaru's eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. The morning light grew brighter, illuminating the dense thicket where his comrades prepared to make their last stand. He caught sight of Corporal Saito, the battalion's trusted sergeant, giving a quick nod before disappearing into the underbrush with a group of soldiers. Then, without warning, the quiet shattered. The enemy launched as sudden assault shells exploded nearby, sending birds into frantic flight and turning the earth to dust. Masaru fired his rifle, aiming at fleeting shadows moving through the trees. One by one, the men around him began to fall, swallowed by gunfire and confusion. In the chaos, Masaru found himself alone. His breaths came in sharp gasps as he scanned the battlefield, heart heavy with disbelief. Where was the rest of his battalion? Had they vanished into the jungle? Or worse? The silence that followed was haunting. Masaru Takeda was born in a small farming village on the outskirts of Hiroshima. Raised in a family that valued honor and duty, he had grown up hearing stories of samurai warriors and ancient battles. When war erupted across the Pacific, Masaru enlisted with a sense of resolve, believing in the cause his leaders had told him was just. He was assigned to the Imperial Japanese Army's 3rd Battalion, a unit tasked with defending strategic islands against advancing Allied forces. Training was brutal but brief, leaving little time for the young soldiers to grasp the true horror they would face. Masaru learned to march long distances with heavy gear, endure hunger and suppress fear skills essential for survival in the dense jungles. Despite the hardships, Masaru formed bonds with his fellow soldiers. Among them was Corporal Saito, a few years older and a steady presence who often helped Masaru through difficult nights. There was also Private Nakamura, whose quiet humor brought moments of lightness amid the grim reality. The battalion had been stationed on the island for several months, under constant threat of invasion. Supplies were scarce, and morale was fragile. Each day brought news of fallen comrades and relentless attacks. Yet Masaru clung to a thread of hope, believing their sacrifice might turn the tide. The island itself was a maze of dense foliage, rocky cliffs, and hidden caves. The men had constructed makeshift trenches and barricades, preparing for a battle they knew was inevitable. When the Allied forces began their assault in mid-March, the battalion braced itself for what would become a desperate fight for survival. As the hours passed on that fateful morning, Masaru experienced the full weight of war's cruelty. Orders were shouted in broken bursts, comrades fell without warning, and confusion reigned. Yet, amid the chaos, Masaru held his ground, though the world around him seemed to collapse. The disappearance of his entire battalion became a cruel mystery. The men who had shared his fears and hopes were gone, swept away by the tide of battle, the jungle, or something else entirely. Masaru was left to carry the memory of their faces and the burden of survival. Masaru's mind raced as he staggered through the jungle, the cacophony of gunfire fading behind him. Every shadow seemed to move, every rustle a threat. The faces of his fallen comrades haunted him, the steady gaze of Corporal Saito, the quiet smile of Private Nak. They had vanished, swallowed by the merciless battle, leaving Masaru alone in a land that no longer felt like home. He did not know how long he ran or hid, the days blurring into one another beneath the oppressive canopy. Hunger gnawed at his belly, and thirst parched his throat, but he forced himself onward. The island, once a strategic stronghold, had become a prison. At night, when the jungle's eerie sounds rose around him, Masaru found brief moments of solace beneath the stars. He whispered the names of those lost, their voices like fragile flames flickering in the darkness. The boy who had once believed in honor now wrestled with fear, despair, and an overwhelming loneliness. The transformation within him was gradual but profound. War had stripped away the illusions of glory, replacing them with a raw, human struggle for survival. Each day was a test of endurance, each breath a gift stolen from death. Masaru learned to listen to the wind, to distant footsteps, to the subtle changes in the air that meant danger was near. In those solitary hours, he remembered the stories his grandfather told him about the ancient samurai code Bushido, but now the words felt hollow. Honor was no shield against bullets or bombs. Instead, Masaru's thoughts turned inward. Survival was his new code, not for glory, but for the simple act of living. One afternoon, as the sun pierced through the thick leaves and scattered beams, Masaru stumbled upon an abandoned foxhole. Inside lay remnants of his battalion discarded rifles, a cracked helmet, a torn piece of a letter. The sight hit him like a wave. These were not just objects, they were fragments of lives extinguished too soon. Among the debris, he found a small notebook, soaked and battered but legible. Flipping through its pages, Masaru saw the familiar handwriting of Corporal Saito. The entry spoke of hope, fear, and a desperate plan to regroup on the island's far side. It was their last Masija whisper from the past. Fueled by this new purpose, Masaru forced his aching body to move again. He followed the faint trails described in the notebook, weaving through the jungle with careful determination. Each step brought memories, moments of laughter, pain, and the bonds forged in the crucible of war. His transformation was not just physical, but mental. Masaru was no longer the young soldier who had marched into battle with wide eyes. He had become a witness to the fragility of life and the strength of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable loss. As he neared the island's opposite shore, the roar of the sea grew louder, mingling with distant explosions. The battle was not over. It had simply shifted. Masaru's heart pounded with a mix of fear and hope. Perhaps, beyond this final stretch, salvation awaited, but the island held secrets too deep for words. The battalion's fate remained shrouded in mystery had they been captured, scattered, or lost forever to the jungle. Masaru carried their memory, a silent vow to tell their story if he survived. In the final days, as Allied forces tightened their grip, Masaru's resolve hardened. Survival was no longer enough. He wanted to honor his fallen comrades by living to speak their names aloud, by bearing witness to the price of war. His body was battered, his spirit tested beyond limits. But Masaru Takeda had transformed from a frightened boy into a man who had seen the darkest edge of humanity and still chosen to carry hope. By early April 1944, the island had become a ghostly battlefield. The dense jungle was scarred with craters, and the air was thick with smoke and silence. Masaru Takeda, now a lone survivor, had evaded enemy patrols and navigated treacherous terrain. But his hope was fading. His battalion, his friends, his brothers arms had vanished without a trace. Some whispered they were captured or killed. Others claimed the jungle had swallowed them whole. The reality was far more harrowing, as Masaru rested in a hidden cave, nursing wounds and exhaustion. A desperate thought took root in his mind, an idea so improbable that it seemed impossible: to escape the island, to reach Allied forces, and to bring back the truth of what had happened to his battalion. The idea began with a faint memory of an old fisherman's tale told back in his village. A small, unassuming boat that could slip past enemy lines if handled with skill and courage. Masaru knew there was no guarantee, but the alternative was death by starvation, capture, or an unknown fate in the jungle. The impossibility of the plan was clear. The island was surrounded by hostile waters patrolled by Allied ships and aircraft. Masaru had no training as a sailor, no map, and no companions to share the burden. Yet the need to survive, to bear witness, and to honor his fallen comrades pushed him forward. Gathering what little supplies remained, a cracked canteen, half a loaf of bread, and the notebook of Corporal Sata, Masaru set out to find the fisherman's boat. Days of searching led him to a hidden cove, where an old, weathered fishing boat lay half submerged beneath thick vines. The boat was barely seaworthy, but it was his only chance. With trembling hands, Masaru cleared the debris and managed to patch small holes with torn cloth. His heart pounded as he prepared to sail into the unknown, knowing this journey could mean death or salvation. As he pushed the boat into the water, memories of the battalion flooded his mind, faces, voices, moments of laughter and fear. They had vanished, but their spirit remained alive in him. Masaru vowed to carry their story across the sea, no matter the cost. With the faint light of dawn guiding him, Masaru climbed into the boat. The waves rocked gently, as if warning him of the danger ahead. He took a deep breath, tightened his grip on the makeshift oar, and began to row. The horizon stretched endlessly before him, an ocean of uncertainty and peril, but within that vast expanse, Masaru found a fragile hope that he might survive, that he might live to tell the world what had been lost, and that his battalion would not be forgotten. The sea was both ally and adversary as Masaru Takeda fought against exhaustion and the relentless pull of the tides. Hours turned into days under the scorching sun and cold nights, with nothing but the sound of waves and his own thoughts for company. Storms threatened to capsize his fragile vessel. Salt water stung his eyes, and lips cracked from thirst. His muscles burned from constant rowing, yet he refused to surrender. The faces of his fallen comrades burned in his mind, fueling his resolve. At one point, a sudden squall erupted, dark clouds rolling in with furious speed. The boat was tossed violently, waves crashing over the sides. Masaru clung desperately, praying to any god who might listen. The storm passed as quickly as it had come, but it left him shaken and weaker. Near the end of the third day, Masaru spotted a silhouette on the horizontal ship cutting through the waves. Hope surged in his chest. He raised a piece of cloth, waving frantically, shouting as loud as his dry throat allowed. The ship, an Allied patrol vessel, altered course and drew closer. Masaru's heart pounded with both relief and fear. Would they see him as an enemy or a survivor? When the patrol boat pulled alongside, Masaru was pulled aboard by cautious hands. His tattered uniform and weary eyes told a story of hardship and endurance. Through broken words and gestures, he conveyed his tale, the battalion lost in battle, the jungle's cruelty, and his impossible escape. The crew listened with solemn respect, understanding the cost of war in a way Masaru never could have imagined. He was given food, water, and a blanket. But more importantly, he was no longer alone. In the following days, Masaru's story reached Allied command. His account shed new light on the brutal fighting on the island, the fate of the 3rd Battalion, and the harsh realities faced by soldiers on both sides. Despite language barriers and the fog of war, Masaru became a living testament to survival and the human cost of conflict. His escape was seen as miraculous, but to Masaru it was simply the will to live, to remember and to honor those who had vanished. The impossible had been done not by force of arms, but by the quiet strength of a single soldier determined to carry a story beyond the battlefield. Masaru Takeda's return to Allied forces marked the end of a harrowing journey, but also at the beginning of a new chapter 1 of reflection and revelation. His survival story brought crucial insight into the fate of the 3rd Battalion, which had been shrouded in uncertainty and silence. Investigations revealed that the battalion had faced overwhelming enemy forces during the battle. Many had been killed in action, while others were captured or lost in the dense jungle. The brutal nature of Pacific Island warfare, ferocious combat, disease, and starvation had taken a devastating toll. Masaru's testimony highlighted not only the military realities, but also the human cost of war. He spoke of fear, loss, and the desperation to survive, stripping away the impersonal numbers often reported in official records. His story gave a face and a voice to those who had vanished. The historical significance extended beyond the immediate battle. Masaru's escape underscored the harsh conditions faced by soldiers on isolated islands, often forgotten in the grand scope of World War II. His experience became a symbol of endurance amid impossible odds. Military historians later used his account to better understand the tactics and failures that contributed to such losses. The story also illuminated the psychological trauma endured by survivors, many of whom bore the invisible scars of war long after the fighting ended. Masaru himself remained deeply affected. Though rescued physically, he carried the weight of loss and survivor's guilt. His story reminded the world that behind every statistic lies a human life, a brother, a son, a friend. The narrative of the battalion's disappearance, once a mere footnote, gained prominence as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the darkest times. Masaru's courage and survival became a bridge between the past and the present, urging future generations to remember the true cost of conflict. Masaru Takeda lived the rest of his life with the memory of that island etched deeply into his soul. He rarely spoke publicly about the battle or his escape, but those who knew him understood the quiet strength he carried. In the decades following the war, Masaru returned to his village, changed forever by what he had witnessed. He dedicated himself to peace, teaching younger generations about the value of life and the futility of hatred. His story was passed down through family and friends, growing into a powerful reminder of the fragility of human life during wartime. It stood as a silent plea for compassion and understanding beyond national boundaries. Masaru's legacy is not one of heroism in battle or victory, but of endurance, loss, and the quiet dignity of survival. He represents countless soldiers whose names were lost to history, but whose sacrifices shaped the world. The vanished battalion, once forgotten, is remembered through his testimony and echo of lives interrupted but not erased. Masaru's experience reminds us that war is not only fought with weapons, but with the will to carry on despite despair. In honoring his memory, we recognize the universal suffering caused by war and the shared humanity that transcends divisions. Masaru's story teaches us that survival is an act of courage, and remembrance is an act of respect. The island where his battalion disappeared remains silent, but Masaru's voice continues to speak a testament to those who vanished and to the enduring hope for peace. This is the history of World War II. Whoever oppresses the innocent is an oppressor. Neither the earth belongs to this oppressor, nor does the sky belong to him. We stand, now and forever, with the oppressed. 3 important questions for the audience. 1. How would you feel if you were the only one left standing after your entire team disappeared? Could you find the strength to keep going? 2. What do you think Masaru's story tells us about the hidden human struggles behind every war we hear about? 3. If you could ask Masaru one question about his journey, what would it be and why? This is WW2 Files. See you in the next one.